Guys, it's Kristine Leahy again with trying to keep it social here while we're coming to you from our homes. That's our only option at this point. Today, I have a really exciting guest. I'm so excited to talk to him. John Romaniello is joining me, a New York Times bestselling author. You also have some really great articles up on your website that I've been digging through while we have all this time. And you are also, you teach people how to write better, specifically entrepreneurs, in order to help their business. Am I getting that correct?
That is correct. And thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to get to talk to you and to be able to share with people. And it's wonderful that we are using this time when the world has decided that none of us are allowed to go out and play to find ways to connect. And so I really appreciate you using your platform to spread the knowledge.
I reached out to you specifically because I think a lot of people are sitting there right now trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with all this time I now have on my hands? And probably some people are going to turn to writing. Maybe they want to write a book. Maybe they want to write something for their business. Are you seeing people reach out to you about that right now?
Yes, it's very interesting. I'm very fortunate to be in a position where I provide a service that has seen an uptick, because there are so many people who, now that they are sort of being forced to take time off, they have the opportunity to pursue a passion project. Many people are starting online businesses, sometimes some for the first time, others are restarting them, and they want to know how to effectively create content that's based around writing, whether that is long Instagram captions or whether it's articles, newsletters, and then of course sales copy, the stuff that actually is informing the people about the offers for which they get paid. And then there's another segment of individuals who are finally getting ready to write that book, and they want to know how to do that. And then those people are like, am I a good enough writer? Or what is the process of writing a book? And so I help with all of that. So it's nice to have so many people reaching out, and it's great to be in this time. It keeps me busy.
Yeah, your business must be kind of thriving right now when a lot of others are really struggling. Is writing right now more important than ever because it's kind of one of the only ways we have to communicate with each other than Zoom conference calls?
It's so interesting for this to be happening in 2020, because writing has been around for it's not going anywhere. It's the oldest form of recorded communication, but there was a long period of time starting in around 2011 and ending in around 2019 where people just kept harping on video. Things are, it's a visual platform, whether it's Instagram or YouTube. And while video-driven content is still tremendously important, what we're seeing now is that people want a little bit more agency in the way that they consume it. And so one of the issues with video is you can only watch it at the speed that it was created and meant to be watched. You can't really fast forward and get the full effect as you can maybe with a podcast, listening to it on 1.5 speed. People are also finding that if you're a content creator, someone who produces information, you want that information to be found. And while something like YouTube does have a great search function, the fact is Instagram and YouTube they're where the party is right now, but Google owns the club.
So when people are coming to you for the first time and they're maybe handing you some things that they've written already, or they're trying to get started, what is the first issue that you find usually right off the bat?
That depends. There's three types of people. People learn three different ways, right? There are people from a generation ahead of me, and when they went to school, they learned grammar. And that is very much learning language from based on the rule set of how it is written. And so they turn in very clean writing, but because there is a rigid rule set, their voice does not shine through. On the far other end of the spectrum, you have millennials and people younger who grew up in a generation of writing from their own perspective, and they learned something called whole language. And because they didn't learn all of the grammatical rules, their voice is very, very apparent, but structurally they struggle and they don't really know where the commas go. And so depending on kind of when you learn, you'll be in one of those two camps. At least those are the mechanical things. But more than anything else, people struggle with doubt. They want to know if what they're writing is worth writing, and the practice of doing it can be very frustrating.
How do you decide if something is worth writing?
If it's worth talking about, if you would have a conversation about it at a dinner table, then it's worth writing. If it's a story that you've told before, if If it's a piece of information that answers a question that has ever been asked to you, then it's worth writing. And then you just have to be good enough to make it worth reading. And something I always tell people is, anytime people ask you a question, they're not just asking for an answer or a fact, they're asking for a story. And a big, just as something as simple as like, what do you do? People don't just want to know what your job is. They're not asking, what do you do for a living? They're really asking you, how did you come to be doing that thing to support yourself?
Mm-hmm.
When they ask where you're from, it's not where do you live, it's how did you get from where you were born to where you live now? And what were the interesting things in between? And if anyone has ever asked you that question, and I know they have, at a dinner table, at a wedding, when you first meet someone on a date, that is something worth writing. Something about you that teaches people, and something that can be used to educate, entertain, inform, or evoke emotion. Anything can be worth writing. Stories are, they can be, we have, you see it in movies. There are very like really deep dramas, but there are also silly comedies and sitcoms and TV shows. Any story is worth telling if it's well told. And that's where I come in.
What's the best way for someone just to get started?
To just start asking themselves, what would I want to hear? The big thing that people struggle with is getting words on the page. And it's, people don't suffer from talker's block, but they suffer from writer's block. There is this big feeling that we are the writing is supposed to be big and important. And because of that, it becomes very hard. You judge yourself as the words are coming up on the screen. And I'm of the opinion that the backspace key is the worst thing to ever happen to writers. Because when you make it so easy to go back, it becomes much harder to go forward. You write a sentence, and then instead of moving on to the next sentence, you go back and try and edit and make it perfect. So the big thing is, try to get it all out of your head. Write a really terrible first draft, and then go back and edit it 3 days later. A first draft can be edited, a blank page cannot.
What if you're writing a book, though? That's a lot of going back.
Sure, but one of the most brilliant things you can do is go back and look at some of the greatest works of fiction and find the first drafts of those, and they're findable online. And when you see the difference in the first draft between Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and the published draft, having that before and after snapshot really informs you that this is a process. Nobody writes a book and then hands it into their editor without, like, every major book you've ever written, and every minor one, they all go through several edits. But the most important thing is to just get it out. If you're writing a book, that's very different from writing an article or a caption or something. Writing a book, the best thing you can do is outline it first. If you have a really exceptional outline, then at some point, especially if it's a nonfiction book where you're just like writing something about which you are an expert, you create an ironclad outline. It's almost just like filling in the blanks after that. If you're writing a fiction book, some sort of novel with a narrative, you have to outline that and plot it so you know the adventure that your characters are going to go on.
Sure.
But everything requires an outline, and everything will require a lot of editing.
So the best way to overcome writer's block is to just write.
Which sounds counterintuitive. The easiest way, I think, to overcome writer's block is to start with building the habit of writing. And so you want to start with writing prompts. And if I were to ask you, so there's this aphorism in the writing world that the first rule of writing is to write what you know, and which means like write the stuff that happens in your day-to-day life. That's not wrong, but it's not 100% right. Write what you know is often conflated with write what you love. And if you were to start writing about something you love, you're very attached to the content itself. If you start writing about your grandmother who was a huge influence on you, or the love of your life, or your first heartbreak, you are very emotionally attached to the story itself, to the events that happen in the order that they happen. And you'll also be attached to the craft, the mechanical way that the writing is coming out. And if you're emotionally attached to both of those things, it becomes very difficult to accept feedback or to improve either one of them.
Sure. Or interesting, really, for someone else to read.
Right. It's so scary. Whereas if I told you just write a story about your morning routine, you have no emotional attachment to that. And so that the goal there is to just get you writing. And because you have no attachment to the content, we can focus entirely on improving the craft. And then once you feel confident in the craft, you can go back and write the things that are very important to you. So just starting with things you don't care about. I always tell my clients, you have to find the magic in the mundanity. If you can write a beautiful story about what it was like to stand in line at Dunkin' Donuts and watch a mother with her kids decide what flavors to pick out, then you're okay to go and write about your first heartbreak. But if you can't make your day-to-day interesting, then making the big events interesting is like, you might not be ready for that. Because most of our life is not weddings and funerals. Most of our life is all of the like little minuscule moments that connect the random Thursdays together.
One of the other things that people are having to adjust to now is working from home.
Yes.
And you work from home. So it can get a little claustrophobic. Maybe you can't get motivated to work. Are there any tips or advice that you can give to people who are now forced to work at home?
Yes, so much. Firstly, respect Parkinson's law. Parkinson's law states that the perceived complexity of a task will expand or contract to fill the time you allot it. And so this is why, you can't get inspired until you have a deadline. If everyone who's ever written a college paper the night before remembers that, like, you had a whole semester and you just couldn't find the time, but then all of a sudden you found 3 hours beforehand.
Sure.
This is very true. When you work from home, especially when you work for yourself, you have to find ways to apply urgency and pressure. So creating deadlines is very, very important. And so for me, I work at home, and I'm currently here in California living with my partner who also works from home. And so we have like pretty strong rules about work hours. I work from I do just pure writing from 8 a.m. till 10 a.m. And one of the big things I do there is I make sure my computer is charged the night before, and then I don't charge it while I'm writing. And so there's something about watching my battery drain. The last 30 minutes of that writing session get very, very, very productive. Wow. And so just a forced sort of deadline like that, where I'm only writing for these 2 hours, this is the time I'm working on my book, and I have to complete it before my computer dies. There's something about that that just inspires me to write more. It's also important to have separation. When you start working from home, it's tempting to do everything in the same room. You eat in the living room, you work in the living room, you relax in the living room. I really recommend against that. There's a lot of environment conditioning that goes into how our brains respond and activate. And so as you can see right now, I'm in a pretty empty room. This is our spare bedroom. This is the office. And this is where I do my podcasts or my interviews. It's also where I'm doing all of my work. And so during the course of the day, this is very much a workspace. And then when I'm done working for the day, I go back out into the living room, and that's where I just relax.
Is there anything that you're working on specifically right now that you're writing?
Yes, I'm in the midst of writing a few different books, but the big thing that I am most excited about relative to sort of the whole coronavirus is over the past, it's starting in late 2019 into 2020, I had set an intention that I was going to go to a different city every month and teach storytelling workshops. And so I wound up doing 3 every month, and I taught them in New York, in Los Angeles, in San Diego, in Miami. I taught one in Toronto. And now with all of this going on, I can't go teach workshops. And so something that I wasn't planning on doing until 2021, I'm doing now, and it's basically putting together an online course for the workshop. And so that's something that won't be released for like another month or 2, but just next week, I'm actually just doing a one-time masterclass on storytelling and writing that anyone can sign up for. Normally my storytelling workshops are about $3,000, which is very high ticket, and I'm very lucky that people care enough about me to pay that. But this, is it's on the internet, and it's for we're going to take up to 25 people, and it will be $500, and we'll be making big donations to we're looking for charities that we can donate to that will allow us specifically to help with people in the service industry who are out of a job for the time being, and we're trying to look for how we can help there. So it's really great opportunity. So if anyone is interested in that, it's just on my site, johnromaniello.com/stay-at-home stories.
Perfect. And then they can probably also keep on your Instagram. I'm sure you'll post about it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. John, thank you so much. This is all really, really insightful information. It makes me want to go write a couple books myself.
I think you should. You've got a story to tell, and I'd be excited to read it.
Thank you so much, John.